What is an atheist? Can you define what that is for me?
Oh, certainly. Throughout history, there have been a number of theologians and politicians who have been deeply concerned with one question: do you believe in God? And the answer yes means you're a theist, and this applies to any God. And the answer no means atheist, and that is the word atheism means without theism. So there are some people that want to put in other terms or color things a little bit, but that's because they're interested in philosophy and are looking for an argument. In simple layman's terms, the theist says there is a God. The atheist says, I don't believe you.
And so you don't believe, do you believe there is a God?
No.
Do you believe there is a devil?
No.
No. And have you always had this belief?
Well, this isn't a belief. This is a lack of belief. And I didn't realize what belief really meant in religious terms until I became an activist myself, when I discovered that belief is an act of will. See, if I say that I believe something, it means that this is what I think is most likely true or closest to the truth, but that I don't know it because I can't show it. Whereas a believer tends to put a different spin on that. I mean, they believe as a conscious act of will to convince themselves of something that is not evidently true. And so that's what that it seems to me that believers involve more make-believe than what I would call a sincere belief. So I don't use the word believe anymore in application to what I do. I mean, I think this or that, and I'm open to change my mind all the time.
And so you have no proof that there is no God or no Satan. You just blah, blah, blah.
Do you have proof that there are no leprechauns?
No.
Do you believe in leprechauns?
No.
Okay, so if you don't have a reason to believe something, that's a pretty good reason not to believe it.
Were you a Christian at one time?
I was, because I was lied to. I was told that God was a conclusively proven scientific fact, and that to question whether there was a God was just as crazy as to question whether we really have a president. And I didn't realize for the longest time that I could even question that. And then, of course, all of the claims that not just my family's religion, but in fact any religion ever made with regard to God were always empty assertions.
So you don't know that there is no God.
No, I know that there's no God because God is not even a possibility. It's a logical contradiction.
Oh, okay.
Now, for the longest time, I was just an agnostic atheist because I didn't have sufficient information. I wasn't convinced that there was a God, but it seemed less and less likely as time went on. Eventually, I realized that the Hitchens razor is what is asserted without evidence may be dismissed without evidence. That makes perfect sense to me. And my favorite quote from Abraham Lincoln is that it is an established maxim in morals that he who makes an assertion without knowing whether it is true or false is guilty of falsehood. And the accidental truth of the claim does not justify or excuse him. And in fact, every religion posits baseless assertions as if it was a matter of fact. And I know a philosophy professor who says that faith is pretending to know things you don't know. And that seems an apt description. Every religion makes claims as fact that they cannot show to be true. And so we would call that lying.
So who told you that there was a God?
There's a number of people that told me different versions of God, although they could never agree with who God is or what God is, but they all profess to know him personally.
When you first became a Christian, who told you at that time that there was a God?
My family, of course, raised me to believe that there was a God, and then I got to see inter-Christian prejudice, because my family are one denomination, and then some other denomination would inquire as to what religion I am. And every time I knew that if somebody asked me what my religion is, there's going to be a problem, because if my religion matters to you, then we're not going to agree on much.
And so when you say your family, are you referring to your father and mother who were the first to tell you that?
My mother was the first to tell me that.
It's always the mother. Why do you think it's the mother that's always telling the kids that and not the father, for the most part?
Well, it's good that you say for the most part, because here in Texas we have a lot of preachers that tend to take the helm on that. But fortunately, I didn't grow up in Texas,
Yeah, but in the
and
home, why do you think it's the mother or the grandmother that's always telling the kids, taking them to church and telling them that there is a God? And most of the time, it's not the father, but it's the mother.
yeah, I agree with you. I've seen a statistic that women, particularly women over 50, tend to be more susceptible to all kinds of scams, and you know, they more readily believe con men and that sort of thing. I don't remember what the specific statistic was to quote it, but I remember reading that once upon a time, and I've seen that to be, you know, anecdotally confirmed.
Right.
Yeah. My mother was always religious, and she, fortunately for me, my family had a tradition that you don't indoctrinate the children until they reach the age of reason. Fortunately,
And
because as you
what
know, the
age
old
is
joke,
that? What age is that?
that's usually determined to be 7 or 8 years old.
Oh, okay.
So there was an old Jesuit saying that if you give me a child until he is 7, I will show you the man. Because if you indoctrinate children into religion in those formative years, you can utterly stunt their development of critical thinking, such that many people never recover from it and can never tell truth, you know, fact from fiction. But I was fortunate in that my family had it a little backwards, so that on my 8th birthday, my mother came into my room with a Bible in hand, instructing me to read the Bible because this is the absolute truth and the word of God and all of that. But by that time, I was already in 2nd grade. I'd already seen, a book on dinosaurs with cladograms and that sort of thing, and I understood what evolution was. So it was impossible for me to read Genesis as if it's talking about an actual talking snake and cursed trees as if they were literal trees that you could chop down and build a canoe out of. It was clearly parable. These are obviously metaphor, and I understood that at 8.
And did you tell your mother that at the time when she came in with the Bible?
Oh yeah.
And what
And
did she say?
she dragged me out to meet to confront my grandparents about this. And after I had read the Bible, and I think this was actually a later occasion when I tried reading it again at 11, because the fight just went on for a long time. But it was either 8 or 11 when I came up with an understanding of what Genesis had meant to say, and that what the metaphor is, that is talking about how you can never go home again. That's a common colloquialism. That once you can either remain as you are, like the rest of the animals, unchanged forever, or you can learn morality essentially, and then you will no longer be like the other animals. You would be like unto God. And so and you can't give women credit for this sort of thing, because the Middle Eastern cultures could never give women credit for anything. I mean, when you go out to the Old West and it's always men, then there's gunfights and all of that. But when women show up, now they're going to church on Sundays and everybody has to behave themselves, you know. So we have to give credit to women to some degree for their establishment of civilization. But of course, as I said, the Middle Eastern cultures that wrote the story wouldn't give credit to women. So instead, they label it as a bad thing, and that it's women's fault. And they couldn't give women credit for that either, unless she was misled by somebody else. So they create this talking snake character.
Have you noticed that every time you listen to the woman, you suffer?
I'm a married man, and I'm not going to go there.
What
But when I mentioned
happen?
this,
What
when I
would
mentioned this to my grandparents, my grandfather particularly freaked out. He said, "Well, then what is the meaning of life?" And that question confused me. That's a nonsense question.
Yeah.
It's like when you imagine
Why is that a nonsense question?
well, imagine the stereotypical fortune teller, right? They always take something completely random, like shuffling a deck of tarot cards, or casting the tea leaves, or casting the chicken bones, according to whatever tradition, and then they read what that means, right?
Right.
Well, it doesn't mean anything. It's completely random. They're just coming up with interpretations so that they can sell you something and get a couple of pieces of silver out of it. That's all that means. So asking what life means implies that there was an intended purpose to it, which again, the construct of everything we see about life in the biosphere and the biodiversity that we have and all of that, not just today, but in past times, and it shows pretty clearly this was not an intended design. And my family just couldn't get around that. They had to imagine that they were the reason the universe existed, that it was all created just for them. And when I said that, no, we are insignificant, we are just momentary glimpses in this in the cosmic sphere, that we only occupy this, like, 0.0 to the 23rd power little fraction of it, and only for a millisecond, and then that's it. We are not the reason the universe exists. The universe existed long before us. It will exist long after us. But when I said that, I was accused of being arrogant.
As a kid?
They accused me of being arrogant, and saying that it was humble of them to assume that God created the universe just for them.
And so when your mother brought the Bible into the room for you and told you, hey, read this, this is what it's all about, and you refused to do it.
I did read it.
Oh, well, why did she take you to your grandparents?
Because I came up with a different interpretation than she did.
Oh,
I
I
saw it
see.
as a metaphor. I didn't read it literally. How could I read it literally? Snakes can't talk.
And so when you went to your father and told your father to tell your mother to back off, when you asked your father to tell your mother to back off, what did he say to your mother? Did he tell her to back off?
Oh, no, my father and my mother were already divorced by that time,
Oh.
and they were in very different spheres. Although my dad was never a critical thinker either, I'm sorry to say. He once went to go see a magic show when I was 19. He lived in Las Vegas. He went to go see a magic show, and he came back after watching Doug Henning, and he said that Doug Henning was not just doing illusions, but that he was doing real magic. And I was deeply disappointed in my father for not having any critical thought that way.
How old were you at that time?
I was 19.
Oh, okay. And who were you closest to, your father or your mother?
Oh, I'd have to say definitely my mother, because my father was intolerant of anyone who was different than him. And it wouldn't matter how many similarities you had with him, he would focus on the thing that's different and not let that go.